Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tochi Okeke. I'm an urban planning student at Georgetown. When I'm not studying or in class, I work with the Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition, a transit advocacy organization working to build a more equitable transportation system for the Baltimore region. And my experiences and background with food insecurity, housing, transportation, and environmental work led me to the Georgetown program um, to explore those intersections and gain the necessary tools. It is my hope to use those tools to help post industrial cities like Baltimore chart better futures and a more positive way forward.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here, and thank you for to Open Data DC for hosting us today. We're excited to share our presentation. So I'm Lydia Woldiasu, says the she, her pronouns, and I'm a graduate student at Georgetown's urban planning program. And I really see myself as a spatial visionary. Outside of this, I'm the operations lead for a spatial justice initiative called Spaces for Souls. My geographic focus is on sub-Saharan Africa, but I really look at GIS as a tool to interrogate urban structural injustices and really center humanity when we're looking to heal those injustices. Thank you. So today we'll be presenting on the Washington, D.C. affordable housing crisis. Koji.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. Thanks, Lee, for the introduction and background. And thank you, everyone, for attending the presentation and learning more about the work we're doing at Georgetown. But for our class scenario, we wanted to look more into DC's affordable housing crisis and looking at average median rents for for DC, how they compare to other cities, the current policies and efforts that DC lawmakers are taking to ameliorate the crisis, as well as some recommendations for how to further meet the need and provide affordable housing to the most vulnerable DC residents. So 1 in 10 DC residents are housing insecure, and roughly 4,410 people experience homelessness in a single night. So, like many cities across the US, DC is experiencing more development, population growth, and more demands on its housing stock. And so, this has led to increases in prices, and many people who lived in the city originally unable to afford housing and be able to have adequate housing given the rising costs. Um, so our first map here highlights the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in DC, which is right now $2,495. And a user going through our story map can click through and kind of get a picture and a look at what housing and housing costs look like across the U.S. St. Louis over there is about 1,194, up 95. In Baltimore, it's about 1,500. There in Denver is about 2,100. So I think each city is dealing with a different set of social and economic factors leading to um, the rents in their city. Um, I guess comparing the two sister cities, DC and Baltimore, DC, for example, is experiencing population growth um, and more demand, while Baltimore has been experiencing population loss. So within each city, the solutions and policies used to uh, take care and try and ameliorate the affordable housing crisis will look a lot different. But even as it stands now for DC, the median rent is still a lot higher than many cities and causing a problem and a crisis with affordability. Um, And yeah, so this next map was created using Open Data DC. On the left, we have a map that showed the housing characteristics of different census tracts across DC. So we were able to get a picture of the different tracts and which census tracts in DC are the most cost burdened. And on the right hand of this slider is a map of also using Open Data DC, um, a map of the median household incomes by census tract. We also use a ward map. I think people more easily recognize the wards in DC. So to kind of see how median income and cost burdens fare across the different wards in DC. So we wanted to just get a better picture of, I guess, the roots and underlying causes of the housing affordability crisis. Um, Many of the areas in DC that are cost burdened also have the lowest median incomes. That's more in Southwest and Southeast DC in Ward 7 and 8. Um, and there are some pockets of cost burden um, people in the higher earning wards, and that may be more due to the higher cost of living, higher cost of housing, and people paying a larger proportion of their monthly payments on gross rent, which is rent and utilities. So across the city, the affordability crisis has come largely from incomes not matching up to prices, but also just the general high price of living. And just looking at the solutions that the city is implementing, we took a look at um, the affordable housing units across the city and how that compared to the areas that are cost burdened, um, and where if the affordable housing units were matching up to the areas of greatest need. Um, since or in 2019, Mayor Bowser implemented a expanded affordable and housing construction policy. So all different agencies, Department of Housing Community Development, planning, were all involved and instructed to work together collaboratively to come up with solutions to the city's affordable housing crisis. These solutions have included financial subsidies, like tax abatements and the city's cash to covenants program. They include land use policies like the inclusionary zoning program. And they've also included comprehensive and neighborhood planning. So where it stands now, the um, affordable housing unit construction and placement is widespread across the city, most concentrated in wards 8, 6, 1, and 2. And probably came as a result of those expanded policies to increase affordable housing across the district and increase affordable housing across income levels. So, of course, there is still great need, but those policies have gone a long way in making the city um, more affordable. I think it's always a balance of the development in the city and um, making the city a place where people want to be, but also managing that demand and the high housing and cost of living prices that come with that as well. And I will pass it over to Lydia to talk more about the solutions the city has implemented, as well as challenges and recommendations.
Before we get into that, did you want to talk about the inclusionary zoning program?
Yes, the inclusionary zoning program is one land use tool that the city has implemented. So it requires different developers in different districts that are marked as inclusionary zoning must have a certain amount of low or moderate income housing in their developments. So that's under land use tool. Cities have also worked with neighborhoods and small area plans and the city's comprehensive plan to plan more affordable units and think about land use in their general plans as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Tochi. That was a great, I think a very great summary of where the district stands right now when it comes to the affordability crisis. So kind of getting into some of the affordable housing projects that are set to launch soon. We wanted to highlight a couple of them. So the first is the bridge, which is at 2442 MLK Jr. Ave in Southeast Anacostia. So this space will deliver 112 affordable rate housing, all below 50% AMI. And what we loved about this project is that it also includes a mixed use of the building. So the ground floor is neighborhood serving retail, and then there's also a community center. And the reason why we wanted to highlight this project is because, one, the creativity that planners, those in housing, and those in the DC government at large should approach when it comes to the issue of housing is how can we do mixed use in as many opportunities as possible. So this place, even though it has a high unit count, so 112 units is a lot, all affordable, but there's, you know, a intentionality when it comes to how will this space be used beyond housing. And we know there's so much data that supports grounding, community building, grounding, you know, stronger networks across neighborhoods, and by rooting that in housing. And so another property that we'll also highlight is the Bowen Place Apartments. So this is also a new construct, which is at 2656 Bowen Road, also in Anacostia, and this has a 60% AMI. And so we want to highlight this, that, you know, this is not a new conversation in the city. I'm sure many of you have heard this in your own professional work. And, you know, there is an attempt to address this, and we're seeing a lot of the kind of the project that have been in works starting to roll out now. And something important to highlight is that, you know, these are at 50 to 60% AMI. And so we wanted to really end by talking about recommendations for expanding DC's affordable housing. So like the, you know, just general affordable housing units, like the two ones that we highlight, and what Tochi highlighted as well, which is an inclusionary zoning program. And so strengths for that include preventing displacement with rising housing costs, particularly in, you know, in wards 1 and 2, where we're seeing a lot more market rate luxury housing, and incorporating inclusionary zoning will be able to prevent this displacement, especially from long-time Black Washingtonians. Secondly, encourages diverse neighborhoods. So not only are we, I mean, I think that's frankly, you know, explanatory, but we can allow for mixed use, mixed incomes in neighborhoods. And as we're seeing more of a disparity when it comes to the income and race gap in the city, this is something that we should be prioritizing. Moving on to the challenges, there's still a huge waiting list for rental assistance programs. So that clearly indicates the great need for, you know, more housing. And, you know, so just to say that, you know, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of people who are struggling to pay their rents every month and to keep up with rising inflation costs, et cetera. And something that we really wanted to highlight is that with the properties, including the inclusionary zoning that are above 60% AMI range, this is not accessible to the lowest income earners. So we are really looking to the city to start mandating 30% AMI units more frequently, because if we're talking about the affordability crisis, we believe that it should be targeting the most, the people with the most income, people with the lowest income, the least earning potential, and those who have the least generational wealth. And then lastly, when it comes to challenges, we would love to see varied housing types, including varied unit types, so that can accommodate for larger families and that can accommodate for, multi-generational families and also different housing types. So that goes along with like land use flexibility and like zoning creativity, so that there's a big conversation right now in the planning world when it comes to how can we repurpose office buildings that are vacant. And so we really need to be creative when it comes to our zoning policy to ensure that we're meeting this very pressing crisis in the city. So to end, using the Open Data DC database, we were able to really map the housing and homelessness crisis across the city. And we're really charging all of us here and, to share with our respective networks to think creatively, to think outside of the box on how we can mitigate the future ramifications of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tochin.